Hello everyone. I welcome you all on behalf of Dr. Shantilal K. Sumaya School of Art. I'm Snehal and it's a pleasure to see you all today for this very special panel discussion that we are hosting in collaboration with National Gallery of Modern Art, Mumbai. And as some of you, I can see some of the faces whom we have seen last year also when we had started hosting panel discussions, a series of discussions which will actually talk about art pedagogy and build a bridge between audiences and art pedagogy in some sense. So it's again like continuing with the tradition of organizing panel discussions in Bombay, Delhi and Pune. We are delighted to collaborate with NGMA for this very special event. We are, and it would mostly be a continued partnership with NGMA. I would love to invite Ms. Shruti Das, Deputy Director of NGMA, to actually share a few words.
A very good evening to everyone. I'm Shruti. I'm a curator here at National Gallery of Modern Art, Mumbai. And it's really a pride moment for the National Gallery of Modern Art, Mumbai, Ministry of Culture, Government of India to collaborate with Dr. Shantilal School of Art, Somaya University. And today's event, which is named Being an Artist, Being a Woman, Many Words. As all of you know about the vision of the National Gallery of Modern Art, it plays a vital role in preserving, promoting, and celebrating India's rich artistic and cultural heritage. As the country's premier institution dedicated to modern and contemporary art, NGMA serves as a dynamic platform that connects artists, institutions, and audiences through exhibitions, educational programs, workshops, publications, and public engagement in various ways. Beyond showcasing masterpieces by established artists, NGMA actively nurtures emerging talent by providing art colleges, art schools, and young practitioners opportunities to exhibit their works, engage in critical dialogue, and gain visibility among wider and more diverse audiences. By creating meaningful interaction between students, educators, artists, and the public, NGMA bridges the gap between academic art practice and the larger cultural sphere, encouraging new perspectives and fostering the next generation of creative voices. Through its inclusive and participatory approach, NGMA continues to strengthen India's cultural ecosystem and reaffirm the transformative power of art in the contemporary society. I will just go to today's theme, which is very exciting for me because I don't know all of you know or not. I belong to a family of Madhubani artists. It is also known as Mithila region of Bihar, which is famous for the folk paintings since, I think, ages. There is a story behind when Ram was married to Sita, and he came and he visited that land and he saw painting everywhere in the marriage ceremony. So this tradition is very rich, and I have seen how woman emerges and they become a powerful force. Means in my surrounding, my grandmother, her name was Mahasundari Devi. So I have seen so many awards in her cupboard, starting from the little bit smaller to going to the Padma Shri and Tulsi Samman. So I don't feel being a woman, it's like something which is derogative. It is like a privilege. So in my family, women, they are treated more than a man. So that's why I'm here. But like today's topic, being an artist, being a woman, is an experience of inhabiting many selves and speaking through many words. A woman artist constantly negotiates between memory and aspirations, tradition and rebellion, vulnerability and strength. She is at once a creator, observer, daughter, mother, professional, dreamer, and witness to her times so many things at one go. Her art emerges from these multiple identities, carrying stories which are deeply personal yet universally resonant. Every canvas, every photograph, poem, or performance becomes a language through which she expresses the countless emotions, silences, struggles, and joys that shape her existence. To be a woman artist is not to possess a singular identity, but to embrace multiplicity, to live with many selves, and to articulate them through many words, each adding a new layer to the ever evolving narrative to her life and creative journey. And for me, I would like to take names of some of the famous women artists whom I adore like anything, starting from Amrita Sergil, Nasreem Mohammadi, Amrit Nilima Sheikh, Anjali Ella Menon, Madhvi Parekh, Mrinalini Mukherjee, Bharati Kher, Nalini, and Pushpa Mala, Arpana Kaur, Shilpa Gupta, and many more. I won't name all of them. And so, like being an artist, being a woman, these artists collectively represent diverse voices, mediums, and generations, illustrating how Indian women artists have continuously expanded the boundaries of artistic expression and redefined women's place in art history. And on this occasion, I would like to just mention this is our first collaborative event with Somaya University, and we would like to continue since this is the platform which we wanted to be more and more active for the contemporary art tradition and the students and the art lovers of Mumbai. And on this occasion, I would like to thank my director, Ms. Nidhi Chaudhary ji, who is not here due to her work, but for her, we got this opportunity due to her. And this is really a wonderful opportunity to start something which will go, so many more years to in the future. And on this occasion, I would like to invite Abhay Sardesai ji on stage to take this program forward. Thanks a lot to all of you.
Thank you, Nidhi ji and Shruti ji. Good evening, friends. Thanks for coming for what promises to be a rewarding, engaging, and exciting session of presentations and discussions. On behalf of the Dr. Shantilal Ke Somaya School of Art, I would like to thank the NGMA, Shruti ji, Nidhi ji, and their extraordinary team for the collaboration. I would also like to thank and welcome the participants, the participant artists, Shakuntala Kulkarni, Yardena, Kurulkar, Prajakta Potnis, Saviya, Lopes, for gracing the occasion. They will be in a to and fro with my colleague, Professor Amrita Gupta Singh. We shall come to that a little later. Let me sort of talk a little bit about my school. This is our second year, in fact, with the art school at Somaya, and we have 3 MA specializations in the art history category. One is, of course, curation, the second is writing and art criticism, and the third is the more generic, which is classical and contemporary art. Drawing from an 83-year-old tradition of teaching and learning, Somaya Vidyavihar University is one of the leading private universities in the country. The vision behind the art institution, I was hoping Siddharth Somaya would be here, but I'm sure he's going to join us after some time. So the vision behind the art institution is really quite generous. It's very expansive, and it aims to offer a dynamic bridge between tradition and modernity, between the East and the West, between India and the world, most importantly between sociology, literature, semiotics, all kinds of disciplines that sort of swirl and swarm around in our mental space, immersive art and traditional art forms, so on and so forth. So what we're actually hoping to create is an institution that India will be proud of and draw from knowledges, modes of thought, and critical inquiries that belong to the region, the nation, and the world. So let me make a pitch. The admissions for the MA are open, if you want to become active citizens of the art world and are interested in learning about the cultural histories and practices, if you want to join one of the most feverishly burgeoning cultural industries in the country, which is the art world, come and meet us. Join the course. We are all looking forward to the event today. Just to sort of share a few sort of observations, much of the art that is being produced today, as all of you are aware, addresses the idea and experience of identity, how one belongs to several social, political groups, how one is treated in the world for belonging to these groups, language, caste, political opinions, gender, sexuality, amongst a whole bouquet of other identities, how one is privileged because one is part of one particular group, and how one is punished because one is part of another particular group. So what are the compromises of belonging to groups, and what are the commitments? Being a woman, being an artist, many selves, many worlds, is not an attempt at boxing expressive practitioners in gender categories. Far from it. It is an inquiry into how artists critically negotiate with these categories, and how, most importantly, other ways of belonging enhance the way of navigating one's gendered self. You kind of look around and you see that it's a landscape that's becoming strangely accommodative when it comes to women artists. Nalini Malani, for instance, is having a big exhibition at the Tate. We know that Nilima Sheikh, we know that Reena Kalat and Shilpa Gupta have come back or are going to have these big shows in Europe. Dayanita Singh has just come back from Venice. These are just few of the artists who we all know and whom we like, and who have had outings elsewhere. We also know, for instance, that people like Nasreen Mohammadi and Arpita Singh are now being considered as important, if not more, than their male counterparts, which I think is extraordinary. Now, what does this mean as far as the politics of representatoriness is concerned? How does one take this as a sign? Is it a sign at all? Can you take the sign to mean the unpacking of a larger world of acceptance and of rightful recognition? Let me quickly do the introduction of all the members of the panel. We have, and as I sort of introduce you, would you please come and grace the podium? We have Shakuntala Kulkarni, born in 1950. Shakuntala is trained at the Sir J.J. School of Art, MSU Baroda, as well as Shantiniketan under Somnath Kaur Kutaivas. Originally trained in murals, Kulkarni's work continued in the vein of addressing large audiences but shifted from flat surfaces into sculpture, performance, and new media. Her work is primarily concerned with the plight of urban women who are held back by traditional patriarchal constraints, capturing the wounds and anxieties that come from these constraints in a vein similar to horror. We have Yardena Kurulkar, born in 71. Yardena is an alumna of Sir J.J. School of Art. She went on to do a master's at the University of Wales, Cardiff, after receiving a Charles Wallace Trust grant for postgraduate study in the UK. In her practice, the body comes across as a subject and as material. She explores deeply personal subjects and objects, including her own body, treating the cycle of life as a contemplation rather than merely an abstract idea. We have Prajakta Potnis, born in 1980. Prajakta is an alumna of Sir J.J. School of Art, Mumbai. Her work explores the nexus between the fragility of the human body and the greed of the capitalist state, working across painting, radiology, video, and time-based installations. She examines the overburdened female body, incessantly exposed to various forms of toxicity. Her practice also draws upon the chasms embedded within everyday domestic life, particularly in relation to gender and social inequalities. The fourth participant is Saviya Lopes. Born in 1994, Saviya studied at Rachna Sansad Academy of Fine Arts and Crafts. She was a participating artist and later served as the director at the Clark House Initiative in Mumbai. Coming from the East Indian Catholic community, she often engages with her community's histories through family archives and oral narratives, drawing upon practices such as her grandmother's quilt making as manifestations of dissent. She's particularly interested in the role of women in relation to histories of labor, and her artistic practice is rooted in the experiences of the spaces she inhabits. I welcome all of you, and now let me welcome my colleague, Amrita Gupta Singh, who is an adjunct professor at Dr. Shantilal Kesomaya School of Art. She's going to lead the discussion. She's chairing the session and moderating it. She's an independent curator and scholar and has been the director of the Mohile Parekh Center of Visual Arts for more than 2 decades. Thanks all of you for being here. I'm eagerly awaiting the powwow.
Good evening, everybody. And we welcome here to today's panel. Thank you, Abhay, for the wonderful introductions. Thank you, Shruti ji. And thank you, the NGMA, for collaborating with the Dr. Shantilal Kesomaya School of Art. Thank you, Shakuntala, Prajakta, Yardena, and Saviya for joining us here today, and we look forward to a wonderful set of talks. I'll just quickly sort of open it out with a few questions, after which we'll go into the short presentations that we'll have. So as you know, tonight's panel, Being an Artist, Being a Woman, Many Selves, Many Worlds, brings together 4 Mumbai-based artists whose practices focus on women's stories, body and gender, examining the layered lineage of feminism in art history and lived experiences, and their place in the here and now. The question, what does it mean to be a woman artist in 2026, in the concept known of this panel, is deliberately wide and connects with ideas as varied as the gaze, labor, loss, love, anger, materiality, ephemerality, and the altering human condition. Without taking more time, let's move on to our conversation today. I have 2 framing questions to all of you, and we'll go one by one. My first question is, being an artist and being a woman are not opposing identities to be reconciled, but ways of living in a plural self in relation to a contested terrain of gender, as both subject position and as a category. Now, how has the mediation between the personal and the public, through your lived histories and experiences, shaped your practices and the erasures that each of your practices resists? Also, the second layer of this question is, how do you create space for vulnerability in your work? Shakuntala, can I invite you to take this?
Hello. Okay. Thank you. Thanks everyone for coming here today, NGMA and the Somaya University and all of you. I'm going to start. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay. I'm going to start with really my personal experiences here today. Okay. Not academic way of speaking. So bear with me. So and there'll be a few. There'll be a few points that I've made. I may just go through. Please don't mind. Actually, in my family, we 3 sisters, we did not experience any discrimination or any kind of restriction. My family was very, very forward-thinking, free, open. So that was the atmosphere, and we were free to do whatever we wanted to do. with responsibility. That's it. Otherwise, there were nothing. So at least at that point, I did not experience that when I was younger. Then it was in college and the outside world that I started experiencing restrictions about how I have to speak, how I should not speak, what I should speak, how I have to behave, and all this, and this was in the public and private spaces, not just my public space, also the private spaces. Now, as a grown-up girl, or rather as a grown-up young woman, especially when I got married, I experienced the roles I was expected to play as a daughter-in-law, as a daughter, as a wife, mother, all of that. And it was not that I was forced into anything in my family. We were free, as I said before, but it's the lived histories, it's the conditioning of the communities I lived in, the society I communicated with, that I experienced very little freedom or no freedom to be and to act. This comes too much? So personal experiences and also shared experiences of my friends, my colleagues, my relatives, all of that, all the people around me, and my domestic help, I must include. I saw that I started looking at how women's spaces are violated. How, because of this, there is a lot of fear, there is discomfort, there is anxiety, upsets, even anger, as you mentioned. All that is there, and what really disturbed me was when I started through discussions, through readings, and also through meeting people and researching. Rather than researching, actually sharing or listening to their shares rather, the violence on their body, the violence on the female body, the atrocities on the women's body. Now, we all know, we have been reading last few weeks, we have been reading about these dowry deaths again, and also we have been reading throughout on the atrocities on women, like rapes happening. I mean, it's been going on for ages, frankly speaking, even till today. So these are the things which actually was a turning point for me, where it was urgent for me to share this, or rather address these concerns through my art practice. And somewhere I felt that what I was doing at that time, well, painting and drawing is great, I still do it, but it was not enough for me to say what I wanted to say at that point. So I started looking at how I can expand my vocabulary, how I can blur the boundaries of different disciplines and mediums, and I started including them, incorporating them in my artwork at that point. So that was a turning point where my work came out of the walls. I created installations. I started using photographs, which I had never used, performative photographs, performance photographs, the right way to say, live performances, and also moving images, where I used my body as a site to express my concerns. So this was a huge shift in my work at that time. And this also gave me the freedom to create vulnerability in my work. For example, when I was doing the performance and I was talking about women, their fears, there was no embarrassment for me to do that. Before, I was a little restricted. I was not so open, and I didn't have the courage, rather the vocabulary, to say all this through my drawing and paintings. Now I got the freedom, the courage, the confidence to say that. And also I invited the viewers to come in within my space of installation or interactive work where they also experience that. So they also had to be vulnerable to experience that. So both ways that space was created. Thank you.
Thank you, Shakuntala. Can I ask Prajakta to respond to this? Would you like me to go over it again? No, it's fine.
Yeah, I really feel the self and the woman and the artist are multiple beings of the same thing. I feel I experienced, it's very easy for middle class women coming from privilege also to say that we lived in an, you're given your choices, you're told you can take your choices, you can live the way you want to. But it's only when you take certain decisions you realize that it's not as open as you're made to feel. So I'd point to one, I think, initial moment in my life, my career. So this was 1997. I'm in JJ. I'm in my third year in JJ. And I was absolutely blown by images that I had come across at that time of land artists and site-specific installations, say, made by Christo and John Claude and Gordon Marta Clark. And I was quite blown with these images. And, I was almost thinking that you don't need a gallery space then. You have a certain kind of freedom to make art wherever you want. This is the kind of art one was looking at and trying to kind of inhabit and make. But then you're also, so this is what you're studying in JJ, you're exposing yourself to all these different books and things that you're coming across. And then you're traveling in the train and going back to Thane, where I was growing up. And I was hounded by my neighbors around that time because, you have an artist living in the building now. And their expectation of you is that you should be able to now make a good rangoli. Now that you're in JJ, if you can't make a good rangoli, then, what are you? So this is third year JJ when you're like, also being a bit rebellious and, you want to take on the world as a young person maybe. What I did was I drew lines, these broken lines from the ground floor of my building to the third floor where we were staying. These were broken white lines which were just like made into, as though these lines were moving from the ground floor to the third floor as a site-specific installation. So for me, that's what I'm imagining. And it did create a lot of questions amongst my neighbors. My neighbors kept asking, is this art? Is this, now are you making modern art? Now, where is the rangoli? And I think that was my way of pushing back and saying, no, as an artist, I'm not going to fit into the perceptions that you have, and I'm going to make the kind of work that I'm going to make. But this also obviously comes from a space of privilege. I understand that today. Also, when one is, say, drawing that one line on this was a site-specific installation which we did in Thane when there was this lake which was being encroached upon, and I just wanted to draw a line, and then we were stopped by MNS people, and so of course there is this sense of privilege that I know that one has, but also I think more recently when for the Sharjah Biennial there was this one work where I met some group of women and heard their testimonies on how life is difficult for them, how basically just the everyday, the burden of just going through the everyday. These are women working in as domestic help in different people's homes, and how extreme exhaustion is what is it doing to their bodies is something that I think um, is something that I realized is something that I kind of felt within with just listening to them. So I think the position of the self has always been in a way to kind of push boundaries. And the other thing I think about vulnerability is I feel like it's the most comforting place for me as an artist. I feel if I'm putting an egg in the fridge and taking a photograph out of it, or if I'm making a crack on the wall, it is vulnerability that one is addressing through one's work. Nothing else than that. The other thing which I want to kind of bring back to what Abhay mentioned about boxing people. I think I've also heard it from close friends how they feel. The problem with categories is that it can almost it can almost reduce someone to just one thing, and one can miss out on certain say layers in one's practice, or miss out on the nuances that one is trying to speak through one's work. That is the problem with categorization, which is, I do feel it's extremely important and important to have, but I think the thing that I've heard from certain friends who feel that a lot of time the gaze becomes a problem. If someone's looking at you just as a, because when you travel abroad, you're an Indian artist. You're an Indian artist who's also a woman artist. And the kind of expectation that the West would have for your work would be quite limited, because their understanding of the ground realities is quite limited. So I think playing to that becomes a problem. So one is kind of resisting all of that and still trying to own up to the language one believes in.
Thank you, Prajakta. We'll come to all this when we discuss your work. Yardena, can I ask you to respond, please? Can I just request, there's a sound coming to when doing the conversation, if that can be sorted out. Thank you.
So right now at this moment, while I sit here, I just want to comment that it's pretty warm. And I guess it's the body, it's the menopausal body that is dealing with a lot of things that are happening in the environment. So, it's just something that I like to start with, that it's your body that's reacting, and it's your body that's responding all the time. But I'm a little curious, like I'm sure the rest of us are, that why do we still have conversations about women artists? All right. So why are we still having conversations about women artists? And I think that these conversations are important, and they are necessary, because I think women artists have women, not just artists, have a certain lens of looking at the world. And this lens is quite unique. It's not only unique between women artists, but it's unique to the world as well, because there is a certain sort of emotion, a vulnerability, a certain sense of not being afraid to reveal yourself, which comes through in whatever we do, probably what we say, and then as artists in what we do. So I think for me, I don't create works thinking that I'm a woman artist. My work is more, it responds more to an emotion, or it responds to a memory or a feeling. And if that happens to be something that's gendered, so be it. So I don't sort of move around the works that I do, thinking that I'm a woman, but really thinking about the histories that I have gathered through the years that I have been in a small Beni Israeli community. We're a small community of around 3,000 Jews now in India. We come from, I come from that sort of a community which has a lot of affinities with the Maharashtrian people, but at the same time, this urge to stand out and be, connected as a small community. So those are the kind of experiences and those are the kind of memories that I sort of connect with, and those come up in the works. They are memories. They are, sometimes it's just the act of women making this Rosh Hashanah halwa, and this halwa is a 4-hour stirring. We stir for 4 hours, and the women of the house get together and stir it. And that's the kind of memory, that one has while living in this sort of a small community. I'm not religious anymore, but I do come from that sort of a religious, traditional and religious sort of a family. So those are the kind of things that, which... So I feel that for me, I'm trying to understand the world through my making. The world is there, it inspires me, and then that's what evolves in the studio. So now you spoke about vulnerability as well. So I feel that as artists, all of us are vulnerable at every stage of creation, almost every stage of creation. For me, the choice of materials, like clay, most of the times I don't fire the clay. The clay is left to dissolve or to disintegrate. So that vulnerability comes right from the choice of materials. It's where the material speaks to me about my own mortality and about my own identity. So these kind of vulnerabilities are present at every stage of an artist's life. And I think as women artists, we look at it through a certain lens. We express in a certain way. So yeah, I think conversations about women artists are important. I did debate a lot in my head that why are we actually talking only about women artists? Because we are artists at the end of the day. But yes, the lens that we look at art through, the lens that we look at the world through, is quite unique in that sense. So besides, for vulnerability, even when we are talking about material, or we are saying that the material is in itself transient, and therefore the work most of the times doesn't actually exist except for an image, then the process is also vulnerable in that sense. The process is not necessarily viewed or seen, but experienced as an artist. So I think all those vulnerabilities come at every stage of the work, and the vulnerability that comes with the viewer seeing the work doesn't really matter at the end of it, because you've gone through all those emotions, and therefore what is seen is really the residual of that experience. So yeah, so that's what it means.
Thank you, Yardena. Saviya, can I ask you to respond to this? We'll be going to the next question of materials later, but that's also be explored. Saviya.
So I do agree with all three of you, with Shakuntala over the multiple roles of mother, daughter, sister, and how you spoke of vulnerability, or even the question of why women artists. And also Prajakta of how we have multiple roles, but we are sort of reduced to a certain identity. And there's this amazing thing that I learned very recently in a workshop, is that one of the artist illustrators mentioned of how we are like an iceberg, but the reduction that you talk about is just the tip of the iceberg that we see. So that really makes sense. I will also speak through the position of privilege in that sense, to also acknowledge that I come from a family of matriarchs. I've been probably the 4th generation, so I sort of navigate the space, or between the dichotomy, navigate the dichotomy between the patriarchal and the matriarchal spaces of that being a daughter, a sister, partner, collaborator, or even sometimes just as a witness to the labor that women have been doing for so long, because I was always surrounded by it. And like you said, why just a woman? I would also want to speak about my position or a person coming from the East Indian community. Because for a very long period of time, I did not really see my heritage entering my work. I could not really see that. No? And perhaps it's because most of us who come from smaller communities, like you mentioned, who don't see themselves being represented in institutional spaces, sort of internalize that idea. And so when there came a time when I wanted to work with my heritage, and which I still do, it is very less about nostalgia, and it's more about the questions that deal with whose stories are written, who gets to be seen, and whose are overlooked in that sense. And so for me, memory becomes a very strong asset, and remembering as an act becomes very strong. And I look at remembering as a form of resisting erasure in that sense, and that helps me be vulnerable at times. And when I speak of these acts, these resistances are not monumental or grandeur in form. These are really quieter ones that we deal with in everyday survival. Emotional labor, for instance. And when I say being vulnerable, I also don't want to expose myself completely, because I'm very cautious about that as well. It is perhaps just to create a ground for the audience to relate with empathy, and to not take vulnerability in a form of confession. Rather, creating like a conditioning through the work which can allow me to also be, show tenderness, show my fragility, make faults, and be myself as well. And I think through my work, it kind of, the materials that I use sort of allow me to do those, and also bring forth tactility in the work.
Thank you. I think a lot of things have already come up, in this first part of our speaking to you, and it'll all come out also in the works that we'll be showing later. What I think this whole thing about the public and the private and the public, the internal and the external, is something that it's also about, you talked about cooking, right? It's also what is being cooked in that sense. If you look at that, there's the act of brewing or cooking. I think we'll go to these things later. The conversations. Yes, while that happens, exactly. So I just quickly want to go back in time and again ask another question, which is of course related to, I'd like to go back to art school, right? So, in terms of, because the kind of materials that each of you have used in your work. So in art school, what are the kind of encounters you had? For most of canonized art history, material was treated as neutral, as a vehicle for an idea. But materials also have histories, right? So when you go back to your art education in art schools in Bombay and beyond, what conversations do you encounter around art, gender, and materiality? The binaries of art and craft, we know that, that's embedded. The body as material, art and technology. And, how has your work also sort of evolved through these conversations, both formal and informal? Like a lot of informal conversations also bring out a lot of insights. So I'd like to ask you, from within the art school, as you all, grew into your work, how did you, work through the language of material? And how, when you stepped out into professional life, how that also expanded in terms of your, experiences. Who would like to take this? Shakun, can I ask you again?
Hello. Yeah, I'm going to hold it. Correct? Well, in college, it's very important that I learned about on formal level, color, form, etc. It was important, but that was not enough for me. That was great. I mean, and it is really important. But outside the college, I think I learned a lot more because of my involvement with different disciplines. My first lesson in the disciplinary, my first experience was at home. It was a very interdisciplinary kind of a atmosphere at home. My mother was a singer. My two sisters were in theater and later in films. I dabbled in everything and gave it up. But that was the atmosphere at home where we had theater people, we had musicians, we had dancers walking in and out of our house. So that was the background, that was the space I grew up in. So, and later, actually, I joined, later on in college itself, I was involved with theater. I was part of a group where I participated, but mostly I was an observer. I was backstage observing and learning about physical spaces, about body movements, about light and shade, and all of that, and speech, breathing, all of that, which actually helped me much later. But at that moment, I was just learning, and I was excited about it. And what really took a turn in my work was intimate theater, where there was a lot of freedom. It was very flexible, and it was a very intimate relationship between the space, the viewer, and the actor. We were all on the same level, We didn't have, like proscenium theater, the stage, and we were all sitting together, walking in between, that kind of atmosphere. And exits and entries were all flexible. And at that time, I didn't know it could have been called site-specific. Today, we call everything site-specific, but that time, I didn't know that word at all. But that was very exciting for me. And so the conversations, the experience of these conversations, the experience of being in that space, and also the encounters of meeting all these theater people and also doing workshops with them where the usage of body, which was, I did learn Bharatanatyam and all as a kid, but this was something different. It was very free. I could express myself. I really did more theater workshops than art workshops at that time. And so this was something which today is like a backbone for me. It's the space I still respect and I get inspired, and it has still remained with me. That's all I have to say.
Prajakta, can I?
Time was quite exciting. I think in the 90s when I was there, we had some really interesting people in college who were, I think, on the stepping stone of reaching somewhere. We had people like Shilpa, Jyotish, Justin, all these really interesting people on the verge of breaking into the scene, and one was watching all that closely. And I think what happens with Bombay as a city is also, it's extremely inspiring. So you learn more also from the city. There was NCPA at that time. They were having some really interesting conversations. And then there were film festivals that were happening that one was attending to. So I think all of that subconsciously starts playing into you, into your practice. Also, my colleagues, my contemporaries like Mansi Bhatt or also Meenal Damani were were in a moment where we were all thinking of making work which came from when there were these grand narratives happening where people were making photorealistic work and using the photograph as an image for reference, I think it was some of us who were thinking that it was important to speak from the perspective of one person and make sense of it through that. And I think the whole idea of the personal being political came around that time, because one was also lucky enough to being in Bombay, studying in JJ, you had access to galleries which were showing contemporary art. I remember seeing Rumana Hussein's work at that time and being completely blown by the idea that, works like this can also be. You can make work which is performative and also use really unconventional materials, which I think women artists have always managed to kind of adopt and have, because I think it was also a way of resisting the market, and pushing the market away. So if you have, say, a Mithu working with hair, and then you see Mona Hutum's work, and you realize the legacy that one, is in. So I think subconsciously all these works kind of lay under your skin somehow. I remember seeing Shaku's work, Ajicha Goshti, coming to, I was just out of in college, and then coming to Kemol to see Ajicha Goshti, and it was amazing to see that an art gallery can host an exhibition like that. So in a way, one was trying to, also, I think it blew one's mind by expanding one's narrative. But personally, I feel, again, like theatre, I think this tradition of Marathi theatre, especially traditional Marathi theatre in Thane, because we had the Gadkari Rangayatan at that time in Thane. So it was a thing that families did. You just go to the theatre and see plays. And I would find it extremely difficult to digest, because I would get into how these theatres, how the stage was made. They'd paint like this really cheap looking, because they didn't have funds, obviously, and this whole problem of narration and over narrating, they would paint, say, a landscape outside a window. They would paint the stairs, they would paint the clock. So this problem that I felt the commercial Marathi theatre had, which was of overtly narrating, and I found that really problematic, because when I saw a play in NCPA, when there was just a window made out of just a frame, or as a viewer, you're just made to look outside and say that, there's a window there. So this kind of abstraction that I think I saw within these two genres of plays was quite interesting. I think, again, abstraction in JJ is something that we all imbibe very subconsciously. There was this very famous thing from, people, I think some of the professors would say about how Paul Klee would say that painting is not about making something visible, but it is about painting. Painting is not painting that you see. Painting is not something that you basically make something visible through painting, what you don't see actually. And I think that kind of abstraction somehow played subconsciously within the works, because I think it was important to also spend some time with internalizing things and kind of coming towards certain mediums and materials. So I think for me it was about these various forms that one was seeing, and also I remember seeing the Semiotics of Kitchen by Martha Rosler and feeling completely, again, imagining that as, and I think that plays a lot of role within my work as well, when I speak about the space of the kitchen. But yeah, I think these are the works I can immediately remember. And yeah.
It was also, 90s was also a time when a lot of shifts were happening, you know. So it was like breaking out of boundaries of all kinds of genres of art making. And I think that's a very interesting time that all of you also came into your own. Yeah, Yardena, can I?
So this is, yeah. Now, yeah. So this is 80s JJ School of Arts, and straight out of convent school, right? So we heard the puppet songs and, you know, all of that in that sort of an environment. So for me, it was really moving from a very traditional Catholic sort of education system straight into JJ, which had a very different vibe, and it had a very different. So, besides what one was absorbing academically, there were a lot of life experiences that that one was dealing with, and one was processing, and one was figuring out what to do with all these experiences. So I think besides the amazing art that one was seeing, and one was, you know, there was also these very intimate experiences that one was experiencing. Like, I mean, straight from a convent school, and you go into JJ School of Arts, and you're interacting on a daily basis with men and with boys, right? So that again was, you know, some sort of awareness about the body, and, you know, so there was a jump, like from where one came, and then from how one spent the next 5 years of one's life. And at that time, I don't think I thought much about material. I think it was more about processes and how certain artists are working, and how you know, how you see those practices sort of get influenced in your own work. And I think this thing about material in my own practice came much later. And the materials, which are also, like I said before, they're fragile, or they're materials which are not, they're ephemeral, right? So for example, each of these materials, so again, from there moving to the body, where, you know, you've moved to 5 years of JJ School of Arts, and then you're aware of your own anatomy, of your own body, and you move then, you know, so the body then became a subject of, I mean, my focus sort of moved to my own body and to my own processing of the anatomy, the woman anatomy. So, I mean, I questioned material much later, which was then clay, because clay has, clay talks about touch. It's about touch. It has a memory of touch. Gauze, which is then again about healing. Cotton. So these various materials then one is sort of navigating through in one's practice. So the scans of the organs. So these are all subjects that and materials that came up because of what history they hold. And that's how, you know, sort of things sort of moved through my practice.
Yeah, when we'll go into your works, we'll go that into deeper. Saviya, can I quickly ask you to respond to this before we jump into the presentations?
Hello. I'm just in awe when you speak of JJ stories. All that I've heard about since so many years. For me, when I first got into an art school, I was like a horse. You know, I really thought, okay, it's just drawing and painting. That's how I entered. But also in my 4th year, I joined Clark House Initiatives, where I met a lot of colleagues, and they helped me understand a lot about materials. And interestingly, I grew up around women, so they were constantly either like cooking, doing something, stitching, mending, redecorating the house. And at that point, I didn't really realize that these could be called creative practices, because they weren't really given that status. I still think they aren't given that status. And even the word woman artist, you know, earlier, if I look back, I always think that because I remember my father used to get me to Jahangir gallery, and there were many artists, and I would also always look at the artworks as artists or speak about this. But it's only until I entered the art school, I was boxed up with this idea that there is a thing called woman artist or a female artist. Until that, I didn't really know that they could be segregated in terms of gender. Having said that, I also remember very vividly, it was in my last year, and I had made a quilt in collaboration with my grandmother, and for my final year actually. And this was the very first time that I was making a quilt, which was a non-utilitarian art object. And I vividly remember how one of them said, "You're not making art, you're making craft." And that really irked me. And as stubborn that as I was like, why not? And I decided, okay, even though I'm graduating with painting, I'm not going to do painting anymore. And so because of what they said, it really affected. And I wouldn't say deliberately, but I got less interested into production and got more interested into the relationships of women and the labor they have, or women and care, or how they hold memory in general. And for me, my work sort of gave away, the materials especially, a lot of textiles, they gave me a way to speak of complex questions that regarding daily survival that often go unnoticed. Regarding my practice, I would say it's always, it has been evolving. Like I said, I have been at Clark House, I made a ton of friends. And like you saw Shaku's show, I saw your show, and I remember, oh, there's something called as photography as well, and I can use that as well. So there was a lot to learn. So it's always constantly evolving, thanks to my colleagues, my friends, who are always in constant conversation with me. As in regards to the, regarding the material, the idea of, it's not just the formal education. I learned a lot, a great deal from the women in my family, in fact, especially with textiles. So, for instance, with quilts and textile practices, I learned that they absorb time, they absorb touch, they absorb repetition as well, and fragility. And over a period of time, I got interested into the person performing it, these acts. And that made me realize that the body itself is like a living archive, which just keeps on absorbing these things. And I started to look at the body as like a non-ephemeral entity that has sort of been a witness to so many years of history, of labor, of survival, of wars, and a lot of other things as well. And so I think eventually I saw it as a record keeper of labor, of emotional labor, of care, of sustenance, exhaustion, rest, resilience. And so I think to look at my practice now, I feel like it sways in between multiple mediums. I've come forth now to painting, also questioning, because I was dealing with the question of who commissions paintings and who's the commissioner as well. And that got me, and that brought me back towards painting in a question of urgency, I would say. So multiple mediums, yes, but they deal with, they're like different languages, but deal with similar questions of, again, who gets to be seen, how do we remember each other, what are the different forms of care, if one can see them, and what gets overlooked again. So, yeah.
Thank you. I think, again, there are lots of interlocking concerns and ideas that have come through these two questions. And I'd like to now move into the presentation. Can we start? Yeah. Shakuntala, can I invite you to, you want to come here? Yeah, please, please. So it's interesting that you did speak about your interest in theatre, right, and the body as material, and all of that, how it comes forth in your and also that your art education has been through 3 institutions, JJ, MSU, and also Shantiniketan.
Yeah.
Right, so I'd like you to dwell into all of this, and 2 other things that I'd like for you to talk about is, your work has moved across various mediums. At the same time, you have you have questioned this thing of anger, women's anger, right, in your work very deeply. The thing of the male gaze, and also more recently about the female gaze. So if you could just kind of look through all of this through the works that you're going to. Thank you.
You'll have to remind me of certain questions because there were so many of them you mentioned. But I'll go by this. Yeah, this is a work I did in 2000. I'm not going to talk of individual works, but around it, okay? So this is a confinement I did when the Gujarat riots happened, and I was angry. I was really angry when I read, and I was told that women and children were burnt in a flat or a building, and so I just thought that experience lived with me for a long time, and I wanted to personally experience that. So whenever I did a performance, I experienced that anguish, that hope, that desperation. That is why it was very important that I did the performance. Because otherwise, if I had to tell someone else to do it, it wouldn't have been the same. So it is not just doing something, it's experiencing that. So a lot of my work is my own body being used. So here, in a very small space in my, inside my bedroom, I just put one camera. I didn't know how to use a camera, so I borrowed one wedding camera, or high 8, they used to call it at that time. And I put it on the books, and I did this performance. So this is like she continuously bangs and bangs to open that door, and then and the whole sound is only banging and nothing else. And then she gives up, she falls down, she crawls, she cries, gets up again, and again bangs. So the whole thing is about that vulnerability, like that whole thing is about fear, about hope, about desperation, about giving up, almost giving up, and again bouncing back and fighting it back. So my work is never about really resignation. There's always hope, and I have it. I never give up. And in all my work, there's something like bouncing back. So this is one work. And also I did... Yeah, but I go to the next. I just wanted to talk about my earlier work. It's about films I was talking. I've also played 4 games. And it was a project called And When She Roared, the Universe Quaked. It was about... the wording itself talks about the roaring, like I was trying. But also it was about 4 games that I played, and that talked about power games. One again about desperation or struggle to deal with that losing, giving up, and not giving up. That whole tension was about giving up and not giving up, losing and winning. That kind of a thing. That whole tension was created through my games also. And in one of them, it's like Hanuman opening the chest. I've done a film where I tear my shirt, and inside there's another woman who's doing, what do you call that, Aikido? Archery, where it's about character, it's about dignity, it's about confidence, and it breaks, the bow breaks. And she puts it back together and stands up again. So every time you're bouncing back. That's the whole thing, not giving up. But here, the gaze, I'm actually giving back the gaze. I am deflecting the gaze which comes to me. So I'm looking straight into the eyes of the viewer. Most of the works, if I'm straight, otherwise. So that's about my, and using the body, always about, it's about my body being the site to express my concerns, So this is And When She Roared, the Universe Quaked. So these are reverse glass drawings that I did. I was learning karate at that point, not to get any red or black belt, but just to understand how the body moves. And karate is not about combating, it's about character building, it's about focusing, it's about self-respect. So there are many other things. So that was what my interest was. And that's what I wanted to portray, And this is I think, first time I did a work where I did the interactive work, where people could come in this space, look at the magnifying glass, and try to look at the work up. And it was a big struggle for many because they could see their face and they were getting upset. They had to navigate, they had to move, and then see the work. So it was very disturbing. It was not so easy, and many people slept on the floor to look, while some walked out getting angry because of the discomfort. But I wanted to create that discomfort when you are being looked at all the time, that gaze. So here, it's about objectification. It's about who is the viewer and who is the observer, or who is giving that gaze. So there were many questions like this. So people had different emotions looking at this work. Some enjoyed, some didn't enjoy at all. But about that particular earlier work, I want to say that, at that time, I used to talk about the gaze, or there was this whole tone of, somewhere when I worked, there was this whole tone of victimization. I mean, I experienced that personally also, and there was a little complaint about the patriarchal society is like this and I am victimized. That not so strongly, but like a squeaking. It was always there behind. Though I talked about the gaze, deflecting, standing straight, giving the gaze, all of that was there, but that little complaint was there. That, this is the situation I am in. So there was a whole shift in that in the next one.
Can you go to the next?
Here the materiality we were talking about, I could talk about this because when I chose cane to work with, it was, it's very flexible when you heat it. Secondly, it is very delicate looking, but it's extremely strong. And when I join them together, your gaze is broken. You deflect the gaze also. So when I was crossing the road at Shivaji Park, something very funny had happened a couple of years ago when I crossed the same way with just like I'm like this now. The tar fell on me. It was being repaired, and I burnt my hair, eyebrows, eyelashes, and the skin peeled off and all of that. And I was really upset, and I said, how do you walk in the public spaces safely? That was the question. It was about protecting yourself. So that came up. And then I was also following the rapes. I was going to SNDT and reading off and on. And then I read about little girls being raped. And then I read 6-month-old girl raped. I thought, enough. I have to say something now. Up to and the only language I know is my art practice, right? So I started thinking of protecting the body again. And that time this came up, where you protect the body, but as I was doing, and it was very organic. When I was doing it, and when I was wearing it, I realized it's like a cage. So I'm trapping the body again, protecting and trapping the body. And the mechanism was such, the way I designed it, you couldn't move the head easily, you couldn't move the hands easily. You sometimes had to walk sideways, not front. But also it was elaborately done. It was also talking of gracefulness. It was also talking of dignity, not always like a victim. So this was a huge shift also in my work. And when I crossed, obviously I was very scared. Everybody was looking at me through the bus, through the vehicles, through the buildings. But I had worn it, and I was inviting the gaze, right? So then I said, okay, if I'm inviting the gaze, I can't be so fearful. Like, I have invited the gaze. So that was so important, to stand and walk straight without fear. So that was something, that was a turning point for me, where I thought of the female gaze, which I immediately didn't do, but at least deflecting the gaze and meeting the gaze started happening much more. And there and this was all public spaces, just two are shown, but it was also on the beach. It was in Bombay, about 7-8 places I had chosen. And this is Asiatic Library. So people just gathered to stare at me. It was not that easy when people were just standing and staring at me. And I had not taken permission from the police, so we had to quickly do it, take the photograph, run. But there were comments on me. And that is the time I really felt, okay, stand for yourself, Don't pay much attention, but it's okay. Let them say. Like, things like, ये क्या कर रही है? ये फालतूगिरी है. ये कौन है? ये ऐश्वर्या राय नहीं है, ये सब फालतू actress है. And on the beach, about 25 people had gathered, and suddenly there were only 2 standing. And I'm standing like this with the costume, and I was upset, but also laughing at this whole thing, like people's comments were also sometimes very nasty. And I had to take it. So it was about whether you can really negotiate with all these comments, whether you can really take them, and, not even pay attention. You have that dignity which you don't want to lose, or your self-respect shouldn't be diminished. So something like that. So there I stand.
Can we go to the next?
Yeah. So this is from Julus. So after doing the previous one, which was of bodies, armor, and cages, I pose here. This is called Julus, and it is on 4 walls. It's a 4 projection work, and I pose as a female warrior, and I walk. Now this is one photograph where I walk, but then I'm also kind of introduce myself without talking. It's only actions. I was actually fascinated by the terracotta warriors of China, and the swords are broken, and the balas are broken, the spears are broken. So I had to imagine how they must be holding it, how they must be moving. So all my actions are imaginary, how those people must have done it, or how one would do it. And so I designed these especially for walking and sitting. And I talk about bravery, I talk about courage, I talk about togetherness, solidarity, so the whole group works, But it's
also about the form of the march, right, that you take.
Yeah, it's a march.
It's form of protest.
Yeah, it's also, there are many things, like you march as a defiance, as a protest, but basically also, but for this I had also looked at how on 26 Jan, the marching is done, or in the films. So there was a lot of research, how I'll march. Somebody said to me that, oh, this is Nazis' walk. All kinds of things. Lots of comments all the time I had to face, wherever I went. But I wasn't stopped. I did it. And by the way, all my helpers were men. And it was amazing how there was absolutely no, they had to make me wear all these things, and one of them had to climb something to make me wear. But I didn't feel that kind of uneasiness. So it's also sometimes, I think, in our mind, we are so conditioned by that we only look in that direction, in that way. So that's what I became conscious about. So here is the female gaze. This is a marching position we have chosen, the still, but this is where actually the female gaze, not deflecting, not meeting the male gaze, but the female gaze, that kind of a power, that kind of a freedom, I experienced marching. And the shooting was for 2 days, for 12 hours, non-stop. It was amazing.
Thank you. Amazing, Shakuntala. I have to say that, we have to rush with time.
Sure.
So can I quickly...
Shall I?
Yes. Can I quickly ask Prajakta to be careful, to come on to your work? So the quick comments that I'd like to also, and we've talked about that you're looking at body, gender, and urbanity. You are also, there are 2 things that you look at in terms of the skin and the wall as larger metaphors, and And interestingly, that you also use the form of the curtain with a wish to, if that can push aside an impenetrable wall. I mean, I'd like for you to dwell on these two metaphors that you use in your work, and also the domestic kitchen. How its objects, its appliances, go on to all other conversations of urban and global issues. Can we just quickly?
Sure. Yeah. So this was a work that happened in 1999. This was in my parents' bedroom, and I basically just stuck these bindis on their walls and thought, I think the whole idea of making this was to also puncture the wall. The idea, and I think there's always been this thing about the wall that I go back to. I look at the walls almost as membranes, as skins, as organic separations between the inside and the outside. And for me, I think the wall also kind of connects to the proscenium. So for me, when I speak about my influence from Marathi theatre, I think goes back to that. We can look at the next image. So here, this was a work which was shown at Zakenta National Gallery of Art in Warsaw, and what I did was basically stuck this curtain, like a skirting on the edge of the wall. And the whole idea was, this work basically came from a painting. It was initially a drawing, a painting. Then I thought maybe I should physically make it and see what really happens. I still am not quite clearly sure how I place the work, but for me, I think the whole idea of making a wall into a curtain, the attempt of trying to do that is something that I think becomes visible in the work. I think when I look at my entire practice in a way, I think there's always been this resistance of also, I take a lot from the feminist vocabularies of how other women artists have used bodies and skin and materiality, but I think I resist it from using it in the more traditional ways of using. I think I try and use cloth or fabric in a way where I feel it's pushing the feeling of something. We can. Yeah. So I wanted to clear. I think I was a little brain fogged when with the Paul Klee statement. But I think what Paul Klee says is that art is not about showing that is visible, but making something visible. So basically, I think the whole idea is about illustration. You don't want to illustrate something, but how do you still make sense of image making through, say, internalizing something? This work is important for me, again, because I think here two very close mediums to me within my practice, the painting and a photograph, are almost placed next to each other. The title of the work is quite straightforward, Behind the Back. So this was almost like looking at the skin, at the body very closely, to imagine as though somebody said something and it's stuck on your back as a rash. I think I also, for me, I'm interested in the grammar of image making. I take that quite seriously. And for me, if I place, say, a figure within a work, I feel it gives away too soon. It goes into the direction of, say, an illustration, maybe. So to resist from that, I use objects. I am fascinated with everyday objects, especially still lives. And I hope that these really everyday...
Snehal, can we go to the next?
Everyday mundane objects have the potential of carrying the charge. This is a photographic work. It was shot inside a refrigerator. It's actually an upside-down image of a cauliflower. But again, there were many concerns around this time when I was thinking of climate crisis. It was also a time when I was reading about Boris Groys and how he speaks about memory and if there's a possibility of freezing memory. And I think around this time, I was in Berlin for a residency, and it was also a time when Ukraine was annexed by Russia. So there was this fear of, again, maybe a nuclear war happening. This was 2014. So there were multiple narratives that kind of, I think, come within the work, from war to, say, nuclear war to toxicity. So yeah, but I prefer staging all these narratives within the domestic, within something that is staged in a very private space.
So this is an image from within a fridge, right?
Yeah, it's installed inside a fridge. So I also came to photography because, I mean, it might seem as a jump, but I think living in Bombay, it also pushes you to choose certain mediums. I mean, I came to photography for a very practical reason. One couldn't just be making sculptural works like some of the grand artists can afford to. Our studios are as tiny as our bedrooms, and one manages to work through them. But you also want to not restrict yourself as an artist to scale, because that's also something that separates you from being... Can we stay on that image?
Can you go back?
Separates you from, the other artists, because I've heard comments like, oh, the scale is too small, you have these male artists making larger works, and how do you still break that after working from a studio, which is like a one-bedroom hall kitchen space? How do you still work around scale? And photography gave me that freedom. It almost made me free to, I could install these works. For me, they're almost like staged installations, which are shot in a refrigerator. I don't have to worry about the life of this installation. And then I place them inside and in a file. I mean, at the end of the day, they're just on a file, and I can just print them whenever I want. So in a way, coming to a medium is also coming through a practical sense of what is really possible within your budget, within the scale and space that one lives in. We can move to the next one. This is an X-ray work, and this happened because, I mean, that's also one thing that a lot of time the work happens because there is this one personal, sometimes it's just an incident that can charge you, and then you want to internalize it and see how it can translate into something. This was a work which happened after a close relative developed breathing issues after working in a soap factory. And it made me think, because I was also in conversation with this person, and he kept saying about how basically his lungs were full of toxic chemicals after working in the soap factory. And we had gone through all these X-rays that he was taking, and it made me think of this overburdened body, of what happens to a laborer's body that has gone through various toxic situations, how it becomes a repository to holding all these things. So yeah, this is actually an X-ray film. So I used to go to a medical hospital, and I would carry these strange things. So these are actually water balloons which have gone through an X-ray machine, and the dot that you see on the lower left is actually an X-ray of a small ant, which was not supposed to be there, but it happened to be there. So there's an X-ray. It's just an extra anecdote, but yeah. So I look at the body in different ways, not in the traditional sense of the body. For me, this is looking within objects and looking inside things, and hopefully it reveals something different.
Thank you, Prajakta. We are rushing a bit in terms of time, so can I please ask Yardena? It's interesting that, Prajakta, this last work about the medical thing is also sort of ties up to what Yardena will be talking about largely.
Yeah.
And so see, your work largely, like you talked about, it's about mortality, ephemerality, grief, and the whole thing of body and time. And the things about interiority. You're not looking at a corporeal body, but you're looking at the interiors the heart, the skull, the uterus, all of.
Yes.
So how did you really arrive at this kind of a language? So if you could just explore that.
So I think before kenosis came into being, I was making molds of my own body, and then putting them into a similar sort of space where they were in water, and then images were taken at regular intervals, and it was called 5 seconds later. But what happened was then I started moving from the outside physical body that is visible, then moving into the internal organs. So then there was a change of material. So moving from stoneware clay, which was the warm brown color that you see in the earlier works, moves on to terracotta. This is again used, it's a replica of my own heart. I've used 3D printing and imaging first and then 3D printing to create this replica of the heart, and it's the heart replica is then immersed in water, and a set of 15 frames are captured with the help of photography, and it's called kenosis. So prior to this, there was a whole lot of work on the external body, moving into then the internal body, therefore the change of material, and therefore, different questions about the body which is not necessarily visible, but the body which we still hold and we still nurture. And the whole experience of actually having a replica of your own internal organ, and to put yourself to the vulnerability that we were talking about earlier, to put yourself to holding that and to examining it and then letting it go in a work like that. So we can go to the next slide. This is a detail of kenosis. I'd also like to point out the fact that in the earlier works, which was the physical body, the images always sort of went back in a loop. So the last image always it was in a reverse order. So the first image and the last image were always the same, and a whole lot of, but in kenosis, I dropped the loop. This is a work nearly after 6 or 7 years, moved into the interiority of the body. So the loop was again abandoned. So this was again another very significant sort of aspect in the creation of kenosis. And we'll move to the next slide. Then moving on to the heart, which is really a very ungendered organ. The heart is what holds emotions, and it holds, but in So It Goes, it was the uterus, and it was a very interesting sort of, how this work actually happened was, I found an entry my mother had made of, we were 3 sisters, and she had made this entry where, she noted down the dates that each of us had our periods. And I was very interested in the fact that, is it possible for me to then think about the number of periods that me as a woman has gone through. So there was a sort of a mathematical calculation, which was again very ambiguous, because one is not able to completely define how many periods your body has gone through unless you keep a note of it. And I realized that these were the number of periods that I had, and the uterus was then used. Again, there was scanning, and there was I created a 3D replica of the uterus, made a plaster mold, and then created these several uteruses, which were again wrapped in very thin sheets of porcelain. And again, like I was saying, that the process is extremely important for me, that which is possibly not seen, but is an important part of the experience of creating the work. So these were again the replicas, the porcelain replicas were not sort of placed on the thin slabs or the thin sheets of porcelain, but rather the replica was kept on the table and the sheets were placed over it. So it's more like a shrouding rather than the swaddling of a baby. So that process again was very, very important for me as an artist when I was creating this work. So we can go to the next slide.
Yes.
This is again, so then moving, and I feel that now over from the time that kenosis was created and then So It Goes was created, this is a sort of a latest work, and it's called The Body in Agreement. And here really there is no trace of the body. I mean, there is no body, but there is a trace of the body. And this is a trace which is present in this work. It's a series of etchings on zinc plates. And there are multiple times that the plate is immersed in acid, and there are almost sometimes even 7, 8, sometimes 10 layers till the time I feel that the plate is complete. But the layers are obviously getting buried deeper and deeper down into the plate. And then the final etching was where I recorded my own instructions, which at a different time, I recorded my own instructions and created these series of marks on the plate by listening to this voice that I had recorded earlier. So here I feel that the body is actually not present. It's only the trace of the body which is present. Over
But-
here again, sorry.
But these are twigs, something that you've collected from the outside, right?
Yes, these are all twigs and leaves and things that I found in my walks at the cemetery. So there's a Chinspokli cemetery, which is a Jewish cemetery. Again, a space where so much, it holds so much of history about the Beni Israeli people. And this is basically, just walks every day where I collected these twigs and these leaves and came back into the studio, pressed them onto the plate, etched them repeatedly over and over again. So this is the body in agreement. Here, I think the etching, what happens is that the acid is taking away something from the plate which is not reversible. So again, the idea of the loop and something that is, which was discarded in my earlier works is again present in this work as well because of the choice of the materials. So I know you're...
I'm sorry to cut you, but it's
yeah.
I just have to keep on time. We're already over. Yeah, Saviya, can we quickly come to the... So as we spoke about materials and your concerns with art and craft, earlier, so it's also about your work grew out of family archives and oral stories, and with your grandmother's, quilting as a conceptual anchor, right?
Yeah.
And so you've talked about the female body being a site of where memory intersects, intergenerational memory intersects. You also look at figures of art history and literature in the paintings that you're doing. So how is it that you are really looping all of this in your practice? Can you?
So the question that we are dealing with today about what does it mean to be a woman in 2026, I was dealing with the question regarding my grandmother as to what does it mean to be a woman every single day. Her name is Teresa, and the work is called The Teresa I Know. It also sort of draws on from Chimamanda's talk, which says danger of a single story. And even though she is known from different aspects, like we say, we have multiple identities, this is my version of her, wherein I'm also talking of how she deals with her everyday process of living the life, and what is her idea of feminism, or if feminism existed within her realm in that sense. She talks about marriage, she talks about quilting as a safe space. So the book sort of takes us through her life, how she deals and navigates the ideas of safe spaces. So may that be stitching, or even in regards to religion. As far as I know, religion is right now used as a tool against one another. But to see Teresa, she uses it to rant to her God. She knows there's no one who's going to come in between her and the God. So how do women sort of revel in the spaces they were told to sit in? And eventually we sort of came on the idea through her and me in being in conversation for over 5 years, is that feminism is just the right to choice. And she talks about marriage, she talks about her love for quilting, how she dealt with dowry as well. And she talks about her husband also. So eventually she starts talking of the East Indian Catholic community and about my grandfather. But it's a very feminist over because it's her narrating, not my grandfather. We can move to the next slide.
Can we go to the next?
Here she talks of sisterhood, what it means to her, and also community building, which is a very essential part of being a womanist, I feel. More than feminism, I tend to use womanism a lot,
Correct.
a coin termed by Alice Walker. And in all these images, so I use a lot of archives as well. This book is also sort of a scrapbook, which is still ongoing, as how I'm in conversation with her.
Right.
With the next.
Can you go to the next?
like the way Teresa talked about her desires as well in the first book, I was imagining what it would be for women to, if they are told to, speak of their desires. And like Teresa talks about food, I am also a fan of the conversations that happen on a food table, along with the food that is cooked and prepared. And I was looking at all of the history that I stand on whose ground I stand on, and how does history choose to show its women. There are a lot of, and there was a point where I went through a lot of abuse as well, and I was thinking about these figures who went through abuse as well in different forms and different kinds, and if they ever spoke about it, or if they were given a chance, will they speak about it. And so getting them all together, it is not to reduce them to the kitchen premises of that of a domestic, in a domestic sphere. It is to also look at kitchen as a radical space where conversations can happen. So we have Aarti Mesa, Gentileski, Bell Hooks, Savitribai Phule, Tarabai Shinde, and Sojourner Truth. And I wonder and I speculate actually if they could have this conversation about abuse. And while women often, if we go to see, if we ask them, maybe cook something for yourself, they don't really listen. They would rather think of the community first. And so when given this choice of desire, of given this agency, it's too overwhelming for them. And so we see that these women, they don't really know what they're cooking. And yeah, we also don't know if they are really preparing for our next revolution. We also have various iconographies. There's a period calendar, there's a lipstick for the AFSA Act, and we also have works about these women all around the corner. We also have Saint Agatha in the portrait there, who's also a patron saint for breast cancer patients, rape victims. An emperor asked her to marry because of her beauty, and because she said no, her breasts were cut up, and so there's always an imagery of her serving her breasts to everyone.
Can you go to the next?
Yeah. This is called, again, it's on food, it's called Yaje Vaila. It's an invitation where we again see Karubai Karat, Mickey Kendall, Irom Sharmila, Frida Kahlo, and Alice Walker. Again, coming from a background of painting, I've always only seen women, European paintings which portray women at leisure. And I would often wonder if our women really have that. We don't actually. And I was thinking of care and nurturing as a form, as a radical form of feminist forms. And I know Irom Sharmila, broke her fast by a drop of honey. And I also know that after years of protesting and fast, when she left, people were pretty angry with her. But I also adore the fact that she chose for love, and that fighting is not to be taken on one's shoulders. It's not one's burden as well. So here is Mickey Kendall giving her a spoonful of honey, attempting to break her fast, with what I can call is feminist radical joy. And there's Frida Kahlo, whose painting we can see, a drawing, which is called The Dream, as if Frida is dreaming it. And then again, we have a lot of nuances of femical iconography. That being said, we also have a pomegranate tree under which they are settling down, again, to speak of fertility and labor as well.
Thank you. We are running out of time. It's been a really, really wonderful and deep conversation with each of you. And I'd like to thank our participants audience who has been very, very patient today. Just quickly, before I open it out for a conversation with each of you, with audience members here, there's a range of things that have come up. Firstly is this whole breaking of genres of art making, right? The second is, putting the female body out there in space where you challenge the gaze, and also talking about the female gaze and looking at, the third is about going inward, interior, into your body, and the fourth is, again, from your thing about, dismantling this whole thing of art and craft, putting the textiles into your practice. And I think all of these, gives this, it ties up to the, the title of our thing, the many, many worlds of making, right? Many selves. And I'd like to also sort of quickly, amidst all of this, whether it's corporality, whether there's a body as material, whether there's abstraction kind of thing that Prajakta takes up, it's really this conjuring of a woman's mind in multiple ways, right? And so I'd like to just quietly, before we open it up to the thing, I like to dwell on, we've talked about a woman's rage, anger, which is there in subtle ways in each of you. But I'd also say that woman's rage is also kind of a form of grief in more ways than one. And can we open it out to the audience for questions from this angle, and a wide range of questions that have come up, concerns that have come up about how women artists approach ways of art making. Abhay, can I open it up? Or is there any question, or is Shaku, Prajakta, would you like to respond to each other's works at some level, which I think you already have? And the whole point is, we talked about, the whole thing of what is being cooked in the mind, right? In all of this conversations of being an artist and being a woman. I wish there was more time to sort of, and I'm sorry about the limited time that we have, but can we have questions from the audience, please? And also you have women, artists from different generations here. So there's intergenerational conversation that has really taken place. Yes.
Thank you. It's been a lovely evening to see all the works together, and in a kind of a mind mapping each one of you. I am always concerned with when artists come out of a certain background. They have humble beginnings, and eventually the academic process, they always go back to an academic thought. And I would like to understand today, when your works are presented and represented in different international platforms, the communities you yourself come from, how do they respond to your works? Or do you ever had an interaction with the communities where you have lived, and what do you speak about?
Can you?
Well, all my, hello, yeah, my maids, domestic help, always come for my show, because they are the ones who are my right hand, and without their help I cannot work. So they are always invited. There is a special evening when they come and respond. They come to my studio also and see my work, and I have always talked to them about what I am doing. Or when I'm working with people, like the cane workers, the people I worked with, before I started the work, I spoke to them about my idea, took their ideas. They knew exactly what I was doing, why I was doing, and that's how I share with them. It's not just that they come and work, or even my family, my relatives, they come. Of course, the friends and the artist community does come, but I see to it that it is shared by different people, shared to different people. And abroad, I don't know many people. There are general public coming who found, but that's different. But within Bombay, this is what I like to do, and I continuously do it, because I like that interaction. So it is more of sharing rather than just doing the work. That's what I want to share. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Please interrupt you. You that the older women from Chitrapur Saraswat community, you showed them the film and then had interaction. That was just a point I noted.
Yeah.
To
So,
add to.
correct. So for 2 years I did this project called Ajincha Goshti, going to their houses and asking them for stories before marriage and after marriage. And then I put them together. Prajakta, you saw that. And I invited them to Chemold. And they did, the questions were for everyone, but they didn't know what the other person had spoken, so it was great fun. And they came with their daughter-in-law, granddaughter. So there was this whole argument. Oh, you never told me this? Oh, I never knew this. So there was this whole argument going on there, and it was quite fun. That kind of an exchange within the family also was happening. And I was quite an observer to that. And I quite enjoyed that, yeah.
Quickly, even this also talks about, you talked about middle class and privileges that we have and the encounters that you have also when you go out in the public. What is the sight? What does a sight mean to you? For example, you went to a cemetery and picked up twigs and all of that. Prajakta, you did that public art project of drawing a line around the lake in Thane, right? And the whole volatile, at one level, there was this quiet, symmetry-like space. On the level, there's this volatile public space. And that level, you're looking at the whole question of gaze. And for you, in drawing out from your heritage, you're also looking at invisible histories, right? Invisible stories, invisibilization of emotional labor, female labor, women labor. So I think all of this has also come through into these conversations, and the whole question of artistic labor, that sort of comes across through this work in terms of, excavating lost histories. Sorry. I'd like to also lay this out as a specific set of comments that each of you may have. What does artistic labor really mean? Yes, Shilpa.
Thank you so much for this conversation. I've really, really enjoyed it, and enjoyed the work. And sort of taking off from what Amrita was saying about it being an intergenerational conversation, I was wondering, and this is posed to anybody who'd care to take it, that across generations, you all have talked about what it meant to be in art school, to make art, to think about, and across this, there's been a history of the women's movement, and many of you have flagged various thinkers who have inspired you, whether they're artists or feminist scholars or feminist activists at various points. I'm just wondering what the conversation, and Saviya's work also clearly frames a kind of sisterhood that's being, and there's a kind of thread of sisterhood running in some of these conversations. I'm wondering what the sisterhood conversation among artists, and at one level we also recognize through feminist history and feminist scholarships that the category woman is an unstable one, right? What is this category women? Who are women? And we also know that we all exist on a spectrum, and as Yardena started out with, so what is this box that we are in a sense put into? So we are questioning that box, right? So we go there saying, we're artists, we're not women artists, we're all, because no one talks about men artists ever, and we are very, very cognizant of the fact that no one's talking about men artists as such. So, and in a context where even to be a cis woman is a privilege, right? So to be able to inhabit the category woman, which is an unstable one, and at the same time be discriminated on grounds of being this unstable category. I'm wondering, what are the conversations, and many of you have referenced each other's work. So if any of you want to talk to what it meant to grow up amidst the images, the works, the artworks that were created by other artists who become your friends. Like, so you watch their work, then they become your friends, they become your colleagues, they become mentors, they become all kinds of things. So I'm just wondering what this conversation among the Indian artist community looks like, if any of you would like to speak to it. Sorry, that was a very long thing to say, one short question.
No, I think it's very warm. I mean, it's almost like, I think it's that sisterhood is very present in a very unsaid way. I remember going for a residency with Navjot and Vidya. We were on a residency somewhere in Istanbul, but the kind of conversations we had then, I mean, I think it's almost like you're looking, you feel like that's your lineage in some ways, you really feel like they are your sisters and aunts and, someone that you'd look up to. You'd also, I don't know how vocal we are about criticizing each other's work, but I think I feel I've learned a lot from watching and listening. Let be these heated conversations that Anita would have, Pushpamala would have. And luckily, I think from where I've been, I've also managed to have conversations with Clark House women artists. Let be Saviya, there's Poonam Jain, there's also Rupali Patil. So it's been, one is hoping that one passes what knowledge one has to each other, and is not secretive about holding certain information. You want to also share the pitfalls of this crazy world that we inhabit, the most volatile world we are in. Of course, as I think anyways the world is in a strange place, but I think the precarious life of an artist is really insane. I mean, if you don't come from privilege, if you don't have a support system, then you are really on your own. And you also want to warn the artist. I mean, whoever's come to me, to the studio, we've met, I've tried to be really open about how volatile, how precarious this life is. Where it's not like you make work and it gets sold, that the work that just stays in your studio. There are shows that you get, then there are shows that you do not get. How do you go through the most lean period and still remain interested and remain active mentally and sane? So I think I've experienced that sisterhood.
To know more about that work. So it all revolves and rotates around work. I mean, I still have to go for fish curry rice to their homes yet, but it's basically limited to a sort of a social sort of an environment.
Just quickly say this, that I do have artist groups, and we do talk about food to politics, and it's like a family. But I also want to say that many years ago, Barve, Dilip Randre, who's sitting here, Madhav Imarti and I, with other people who joined in and out, we met regularly on Fridays, and we talked about art. And we don't have to necessarily talk about food and things. We talked about art, and there was a lot of connection, care, there was an intimacy. And now Barve is not there, but we meet still at my place or Dilip's place or Sudhir's place, and we discuss art. And I've never felt that there was no affinity at all. So it's like you said, it's not necessary to have only women artists. I would say artists,
Because the conversations are around art.
Yeah. But of course, as women artists, we talk of many other things, from physical to emotional to many other things. So that's different. Now, that's going to happen with all friends, right? So I think I don't want to categorize here male artists and women artists. Thank you.
Saviya, would you like to respond to that? Because it's interesting, when you fought here, you joined Art Club House.
Yeah.
So within art school, you had this kind of larger community, which you also practiced.
Yeah.
So what was it like?
I think most of what you all spoke was there, but at times we also get exhausted by art. Or talking of politics, we sometimes need nuisance as well, lame jokes, and I think that's what connected us all at times. Sometimes you also, like we spoke of women rage, at times it's a lot of that rage. And who better understands woman's rage better than a woman? So at times it's that, sometimes it's also sharing of family. It's good to have family and friends, I feel. They make you feel grounded. I think they at times also give you honest reviews, I would say, and critique in regarding to your work. And I think they ground me a lot. All of the friends that I have had, and a lot of things that I've learned from them is through food, which is why Kai Banwaitsa, because it's always a question in the present. Even if we decide to gather, this question always remains as to what food do we cook, or what do we get, or what do we order, in a sense. And this discussion just goes on endless for hours. We never come to a single point. Yeah.
Do we have
Okay, I'll make this very quick. Where can we see your exhibitions, if they're going on right now or they're going to happen sometime soon? I believe, we should always plug in. So please tell us when your exhibition is going to happen next, or they're ongoing, so we can go and visit.
Are there any final comments, questions? We have a lot of young people here today with us.
What about the students?
Yes, what about the students? No questions from you all? Can we wrap up for today? It's already 8. Would you like to give a few closing comments? No, why don't you take it? Yeah.
No, just a few points. How does the personal experience acquire the heft, weight, valency to become artistic expression, and how does it get inflected by our gendered identities? We've discussed such a whole array of different pressure points, as it were, in the course of this evening. Vulnerability as a comfortable space that Prajakta spoke about, as a competitive space that Shakuntala spoke about. The idea of a comprehensive community that both Saviya and Yardena spoke about. The idea of remembering, the act of memorialization, the engagement with critical self-narrativization, material as memory, interiority as emotional architecture, if I may call it that, rage as agency, such the body, in fact, as this layered, kaleidoscopic archive. So much food for thought. Thank you so much, Yardena, Shakuntala, Prajakta, and Saviya, and thank you so much, Amrita. Thank you, Shrutiji. Thank you, Snehal, my colleague, Nivas, and Rushali. Thanks to SVU and to my colleague, Siddharth, for always backing us. I'm afraid is he around? He's not around. Thanks all of you for coming here and responding to the discussion. Next month, we have another panel discussion. And this time, we are going to talk about the idea of art pedagogy. Do come for that. Thank you very much.